Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to paint a seascape, specifically a wave, and also some clouds. And I've thrown in a couple of other things, some birds, a lighthouse, and some sailboats. So there's a lot going on in this painting. I hope you enjoy the video. Please like, share, and subscribe. And let's get on with it. The first thing I did was paint my canvas panel sky blue. To do that, I used French ultramarine blue paint, titanium white, and a 3/4 inch flat brush. And I'm using acrylic paints. I added titanium white to the French ultramarine blue, and that gave me a sky blue. You have to be a bit careful not adding too much blue. Just use your eyes, judge it, look at the sky. Hopefully you've got a sunny day. After the paint dried, I applied masking tape. The bottom edge of the masking tape will be my horizon line, and everything above that bottom edge will be my sky. And I'm going to paint clouds in there. I'll show you how I do that. To paint my sky, I'm going to use a 3/4 inch flat brush and a powder brush, which I get from the dollar store. They're lovely and fluffy and they work great as blenders. I use a crisscross motion to get the titanium white on for my clouds, and it's a case of getting enough paint on there, and sometimes I have to go back in and put more paint on if as when it dries a little bit darker, and if I want it really bright then I add more paint as I go along. I am not too worried about the shape of the clouds. I just think clouds. That's really all you can do. And I'm not too worried about my brush strokes because my blender will blend those out. I mix alizarin crimson with a little touch of the French ultramarine blue to give me a grey colour, and that will be the shadow on the base of the clouds. And I don't make it too dark, just enough to suggest a form to the clouds. My teacher always told me, if you want to paint clouds, think clouds, and they'll come out at the end of your brush. It works for me. Here's where I use the powder brush. I use circular strokes, and I really don't touch the shadow side very much. I really only do it on the tops, circulate across the tops, and you get sort of fluffy flyaway bits that come off the edges of the cloud. That's okay, it just makes it look more cloud-like. Don't worry about that. Now I'm putting in the sandy shore, and to do that I use Naples yellow, which is my favourite colour for sand and for sunshine. I think it's just perfect to put if you're, for instance, putting a sunny spot on a bark or on a grass. Naples yellow is absolutely perfect for that. And I'm using raw sienna as the wet sand where the water will come across that. I'll show you in a minute. I decide that it needs to be lightened just a little, and I use titanium white. I just brush that over. The paint is still wet, so it will absorb it and it will lighten right on the canvas. I'm putting a stripe of primary yellow across the ocean. It looks a little darker because it's semi-transparent and the blue is toning the colour down. But that's okay. This is meant to be light coming through a wave. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to make the horizon line a little darker, and I'm going to mix sap green with French ultramarine blue in my pool of watery colour. And I add a little titanium white to it, and it's not cast in concrete. I might go over this colour, I might add other colour to it. It just depends on how I feel that day when I'm painting. But this is my horizon line, dark colour, and all the interest will be in the closer wave and the foreshore. So it's not a colour that I'm too worried about. It's not an area of intense interest, let's put it that way, for my painting of it at least. I'm painting a similar colour in the foreground because the wave, my yellow stripe, will cast a shadow, and I may not have gone dark enough for that cast shadow. We'll see as we go on. When I paint, I make adjustments all the time. I sometimes decide I don't like an area, or I need to do something else in an area. I'm blending this area quite thoroughly, but I will add little waves, just tiny ones that you see in the distance. I think I used a 1/2 inch flat here, and I'm loading my brush very much on the edge. I use the very edge of the brush to draw these wavelets, I call them, and they're just the little tops of waves that you see in the distance. As I get closer to the foreground, I lay them in a little heavier, but this is the top of the wave that I'm putting in here. It's the top of my yellow stripe, and from here on, this wave becomes quite foamy, and there's a lot of spray. Close to the foreground, you get lines of foam, and I even get a liner brush out to put some of those lines in, as you'll see in a minute. And they become thinner and less easy to see, and but they all cast their own shadow, which I don't think I put in this painting, but you can put a little blue shadow underneath them. It gives a little more body to the wave. I keep these lines mostly horizontal, and they just sort of wiggle along, and a lot of them are broken, some of them are joined. As the wave draws up, so the lines become vertical, and it's just the foam on the top of the water. And really, you should try and remember to put a shadow in. I didn't do it, but I'm not totally successful with every painting. Here's where I tried a little experiment. I took my wet powder brush and stabbed it into the white, titanium white, and I'm going to try and use that to put foam on top. It wasn't successful, so I ended up getting a bristle brush around, and that worked quite well. I felt it. And I used that same sort of stabbing, stenciling technique. Pouncing, I think they call it. I pounced the paint on the top of the wave. decided there wasn't a dark enough shadow under all that foam, so I'm putting in French ultramarine blue and just the grayed down pool that I had, and I'm just putting a little shadow, just adding it here and there, just to give that wave a little bit more form. And I pull the waves down in the ones in the distance, just to give them a little added extra lift, just to make them a little more wave-like. I might have overdone it with those. And I use my finger. I do that in my paintings quite often, smooth things out with my finger. I spent some time trying to flick white paint on for the spray above the foam, and I wasn't entirely successful. I was using a flat brush. I twisted it at every angle I could think of to try and get that to flick off onto the panel, but it just was not working until I finally had a brainwave. And I used a bristle brush around a rather large one, and that worked really well. And at this stage I got some of the paint off, but not in the right places, so that's where you see me trying to erase it with my finger again. And I do get a little mucky when I'm painting because of things like that. But in the end, as I say, with the bristle brush, I was quite successful. As you can see, I do things wrong sometimes, and I think there's a lesson in that too. So I don't cut those pieces out of my videos. I feel there's something valuable there. Here's the bristle brush, and I stab it into the titanium white, get it loaded really thoroughly, and then I was able to flick it off to become the spray above the foam on the wave top. And that was very successful. I wish I had thought of that brush. I'll try and remember that for next time. So for the splatter that I don't want, I take a damp paper towel and just rub that across the area, and it takes off all those little splattery marks that are not supposed to be there. If the marks don't come off, just go across it again with a little French ultramarine blue. It's supposed to be dark in the distance anyway, and French ultramarine blue is a transparent paint, so the colour underneath will sort of glow through, and it's a good paint for that. You can sort of darken things without darkening the background, if you know what I mean. It just adds a little depth to the colour. There are a couple of paints that do that. French ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson is another one that is also transparent. I like to use that when I'm painting flowers and stems and leaves. I decide that my wave hasn't cast quite enough shadow, and I do add French ultramarine blue to the foreground. And it adds depth, as I say. It casts a shadow which makes the wave form more realistic. And I think it just adds to it generally. It's one of my favourite paints. It mixes well too with titanium white and alizarin crimson to give you a nice range of greys. I mix it too with raw umber, and that gives me some sort of charcoal greys, which I can lighten up to a very pale grey. It's a very versatile paint. I take the tape off to see what my horizon line looks at, and it's pretty good. There are two spots where the paint has seeped under the tape, and I'm going to use the sky blue to eliminate those little raised areas, and that's easy to do. If more paint had seeped through, I would very likely have retaped it and repainted my horizon line. You really need, when you're talking about water, you really need to get that straight. You can't have a bumpy horizon line. It just doesn't look correct. I also decide that this painting needs more added to it. I've put in some distant clouds. I make them much smaller than the cloud in the foreground, and that leads your eye further back into the painting. And I'm going to put in birds, a lighthouse, and some headlands, and I might put some sailboats in there too. In fact, I think I do put sailboats in there. I roll my liner brush into some titanium white, and I'm going to bring the little rivulets of water up onto the sand. It's clear, so I don't use any other colour. I just use the lines of white to indicate the foam creeping up onto the sand. And you need quite a lot of paint on your brush to do this, so as soon as the brush goes dry, I roll it again in the paint to give me a nice loaded brush to do this. It doesn't take much, and you don't, as I say, you don't need any other color. I also reinforce the tops of the wave, again using a loaded liner brush. It's not something you have to do. Again, everybody paints things differently. Everybody paints waves differently, birds differently. Whatever you put in there, they'll have a different trick up their sleeve to do it. And this is the way I paint waves, but you might paint them differently, so don't be discouraged. if this doesn't work for you. I decide to put some birds in, and I keep it really simple. I do a V for the birds in a soft grey. It will show up against the clouds, and I usually do 3. 3 is an odd number, and it's intriguing, I think, to the eye. I always do things in odd numbers. Somebody gave me a rule for that. I can't remember what it is, but I put the V in, and then I do a little dab at the base of the V just to indicate a body. I think that looks like a bird. I hope you think so too. Now I'm going to put in 3 little sailboats, and I'm just using white paint to do this and a little curve of white paint, and that's it. They're too far out to be able to see the transom or the mast, so I don't put those in. I just put in those little white sails, and that's enough of an indication. I decided to put in a headland, first on one side and then on the other. I was thinking of the White Cliffs of Dover, which would have shown up nicely, but then I thought, well, you know, I've got this turquoise blue sea. This is obviously not England. And so I decided to put a darker headland in. No white cliffs. And I did the same on the other side. And then I got this idea to put a lighthouse in. And I shouldn't have done that, but I did. And it's not a particularly good lighthouse, but it is something. And the one good thing about it is it draws your eye into the painting, and it gives the painting depth and dimension. And that's important when you're looking at a painting, to feel that you can step into that painting and in this case wade out into the ocean, and it gives you that sense of space, I suppose, is what I mean. You can see it's not much of a lighthouse. That's probably why I had so much trouble painting it. I can't paint anything very in fine detail. So, but I did the best I could. It draws your eye, it does its job, and that's all you can ask, really. I wanted something in the foreground, but I was a little tired by this time, and I didn't want to put grasses or steps or anything else in. And so I dabbed paper towel into raw sienna and just sort of roughly dabbed that onto the canvas, and it gives a sense of texture, let's put it that way. I added a little light to the headland. I had taken a break, had a cup of tea, and looked at my painting and decided it needed something on the headland. And then I took a wet brush and tried to straighten up my lighthouse. If you have something in the painting that you don't like and you want to get rid of, a damp brush works very well if the paint isn't too dry. And you know, that can be sort of an hour after you've painted something. If you scrub away at it with a brush, it will come off. And I think I was fairly successful with that. Well, I think that's it for an easy seascape with clouds and a wave, sailboats, a lighthouse and birds. That's quite a lot of stuff in there. And also we've got the headland, haven't we? And not to mention the sand in the foreground. So quite a lot in that painting to do, and take your time and have a go, paint along with me, and you'll get it done. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. I would very much appreciate it if you do that, because the algorithm will find me if I have enough likes and shares and subscribes. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.